So when we're thinking about the psychodynamic approach, we're really thinking at heart about this concept of conscious and unconscious processes. If you look here at this iceberg that we've got here, that sort of represents the idea of the mind and the psyche. So Freud says that what we are aware of, our thoughts that we're actually thinking, make up just a tiny part of the entire thought processes that we have. So this conscious thought, what we're aware of thinking, is really just a small aspect, and actually the unconscious drives a lot more of our behavior. And we've talked again about how within this unconscious we've got these ideas of the id, the ego, and the superego. And you might want to go back to that work that we did way back before the summer if you want to have a little bit look at that in more detail. But essentially the id is this kind of pleasure principle driving the kind of desires and wants and saying, I want everything, I want what I want, and it doesn't matter if it's unacceptable, it doesn't matter if it's inappropriate, I just want to have it. The superego is sort of our conscience kind of Jiminy Cricket kind of style character, kind of being like, oh, we shouldn't do that, we might get in trouble, oh, well, that's not bad, oh, we shouldn't do, and our ego is kind of trying to find a kind of balance between the two and kind of navigate this world. And conflict between those and the interactions between them drives our behavior and makes us act in the way that we do. And Freud said that we are always keeping secrets from ourselves, and that even in dreams we're not conscious of our true desires, and often we're trying to protect ourselves from finding out about those true desires, because those true desires might make us feel uncomfortable or might make us feel like we've done something wrong. So there are three key facets to this theory and how they relate to dreams. The first is that unresolved conflicts cause mental disorder. So conflicts where the id wants something and the superego says that it's wrong, if that's not resolved in some way, then that causes mental disorder. And particularly if those conflicts occur in childhood, these can lead to us kind of engaging in defense mechanisms and trying to protect ourselves. And these can often come out in dreams, and we can see the results of this conflict in our dreams. And Freud also was really big into early childhood experiences, and that's why often our dreams relate to things that happened to us a very long time ago, particularly in early childhood, where these traumas have kind of been repressed and shoved down and hidden away from sight, and then they re-emerge years later when they're triggered by other events. And crucially for Freud, mental disorder occurs in the unconscious. We might not be aware that we are suffering from mental disorder. It's actually happening in our unconscious, the bit of our mind, the bit of our psyche that we're not aware of. And it's only really coming out in weird ways in our behavior or in our dreams. And Freud believed that dreams were this representation of the unconscious. And by properly analysing someone's dreams, they could consciously understand their unconscious desires. So what actually makes up the content of dreams is often this idea of defense mechanisms. Freud believed that the ego uses these defense mechanisms to try and maintain this balance between the id and ego and the superego, and that these behaviors, these defense mechanisms, can kind of mask what we actually want, particularly when what we actually want is something deeply inappropriate or kind of deeply wrong societally. So when we experience sensations or desires in our id that society has said is inappropriate or wrong to experience those in everyday life, well, that's when our defense mechanisms kick in. And Freud, as we know, pretty obsessed with sex. And so for Freud, a lot of these defense mechanisms, a lot of these actions that our ego is taking to protect us are related to sex and inappropriate sexual feeling. So for Freud, dreams were crucial because dreams essentially are a get out of jail free card. You can do whatever you want in the dream and it doesn't affect reality. And so what it means is basically that the ego can grant the wishes, the desires of the id in a way that doesn't actually cause major problems. So if you have an inappropriate dream, well, that doesn't actually affect your societal standing. It doesn't affect anyone else except for you. You might feel a bit weird about it later. So the superego is protected, our societal position is protected, but the wants of the id are sated through this dreaming experience. And often we see this in dreams, that we dream about weird or inappropriate things, but often the ego will kind of try and hide this, and so it'll sort of change these things so that they don't seem as inappropriate, so we don't feel too weird about them. So for example, some defense mechanisms include displacement. So this occurs when the desire for one thing or someone is symbolized by something or someone else. So for example, if your id is telling you that you want to have sex with an inappropriate partner, for example, a family member, Freud is really weird, slightly obsessed with having sex with his mum. Anyway, if your id is telling you that you want to have this inappropriate desire, well, your dream might displace that desire onto somebody or something else. So for example, if you have this desire to sleep with a family member, in your dream you might dream about having intense attraction to someone else, like a co-worker, someone where it is more appropriate to have that feeling. Projection. This is where your own unacceptable feelings are actually projected onto somebody else. So if you're really, really angry and you're really frustrated with your mum, for instance, you just think she's the worst person and you hate her, but you know that you shouldn't hate her because she's your mother and society says that it's important for you not to hate her, and you do actually also love her and it's very difficult for your brain to deal with. Well, in your dream, you might dream about somebody else being very angry with her, and actually you might even dream that you're protecting her from that anger. Symbolization refers to the metaphorical acting out of repressed feelings or urges. So for example, you might strongly feel that you have this desire to have sex with an inappropriate partner. Well, this might be symbolized in your dream not by having sex, but by completing a task or doing something else with that person that isn't having sex with them. Condensation, not to do with kind of water cycle, etc., but condensation, you might minimize your inappropriate feelings or urges by kind of combining lots of things together. So for example, instead of kind of showing you doing a task with that inappropriate sexual partner, you might actually instead have you might condense that kind of unwanted attraction towards the mother with rage towards the father into one dream event about meeting a handsome angry man. And the last defense mechanism we look at is secondary elaboration. This is where we have a series of wish fulfillment images or sensations strung together in order to create a narrative or story. And that disguises the true intent. Let's say you have this intense desire to kill somebody with whom you work. That's obviously totally inappropriate. You don't want to feel that. And so what happens is you might dream about killing an animal, which is still pretty bad, but more appropriate. And then you might attend the co-worker's funeral and you might be dancing, and your mind kind of combines that into a story that protects it. We can see really clearly how these defense mechanisms might lead to the weird kind of dreams that we do experience quite often. The last factor that Freud thought was incredibly important when it came to dreams was this idea of manifest and latent content. So psychodynamicists believe that there are actually two types of content in a dream. Manifest content is the actual experience of what's happening in the dream, what we see, as it were. So for example, let's say you have a dream about being attacked by bees. The manifest content is you were attacked by bees. But psychodynamicists are much more interested in the latent content, what the dream actually means, what the hidden meaning of that dream is. So they would say the latent content of this is that actually the bees aren't actually bees, they represent deep anxieties attacking the person. And Freud said that dreams are used to kind of disguise these unacceptable desires. So the manifest content might be something more acceptable, like the defense mechanisms we saw above, while the latent content might be something deeply unacceptable. such as these unacceptable desires or inappropriate desires. And so, according to Freud and psychodynamicists, manifest content is full of symbols which function as kind of clues to the latent content of the dream. And each symbol might have more than one meaning. And in Freud's mind, people, objects, places, smells, all these things actually represent other things. They're not representing themselves. So there are a few examples below, but almost any object could actually be interpreted to mean almost anything. And as you'll see, classic Freudian stuff, it's all about sex, it's all about penises, it's all about vaginas or castration, all of these different things. So an example of this, Ashmore dreamt about being a little boy and being in a large boat about to go under a bridge that was too low. In the dream, he was in the boat alone, and there were two people, one on each bank, shouting at him. He was too frightened to get out of the boat and be confronted by those on the banks, and terrified because the bridge was too low. So the manifest content is, it was just on a boat with some random people, it doesn't really mean very much. But the latent content to psychodynamicists is really important here. Well, maybe the two people, one on each bank, they represent Ashmore's parents. All right, he has two parents, there's one on each bank, maybe they're fighting, and they're shouting at him. Well, that could be interpreted as of the fear that a small boy has of his parents because they're in authority. This boat trip might actually represent a previous boat trip that was really frightening. Or the boat could represent Ashmore himself, feeling insecure, not on firm ground, kind of in control, but not really because the current of the river is stronger than his ability to row the boat. And that low bridge could represent a block of some sort in his life that's holding him back. So it could be not being promoted in his job, feeling trapped in his personal life, or some other reason for feeling trapped. So he's having this dream that he's going to have to, there's a block in his life, he's going to have to try and get out of the boat, lose control, but he's going to have, in order to do that, he's going to have to confront these two people shouting at him. Maybe what's the latent content there? There's more to it than just the dream here. So psychodynamicists would take the manifest content, the description that I gave you, and try and understand what's the hidden meaning of that.